Gold once lost its value because one man gave away too much of it. Not a nation or an empire, but a single ruler on a journey across the desert. His name was Mansa Musa, and after him, history would never look at wealth the same way. Imagine a king so rich that entire economies bent under his footsteps. As he traveled, gold flowed freely from his hands into foreign markets. Prices collapsed, merchants panicked, and rumors spread faster than the caravans themselves. People whispered his name in disbelief, wondering if such wealth could even be real. In the 14th century, the world was smaller, darker, and deeply divided. Europe struggled through poverty and plague, while vast African empires thrived beyond the Sahara. Most outsiders had no idea what lay hidden in those deserts, and almost no one understood the power rising there. Then came a pilgrimage that stunned the known world. Tens of thousands followed one man across sand and stone, surrounded by camels loaded with gold and silk. Cities froze as he arrived, unable to comprehend what they were witnessing. No one expected the consequences this journey would unleash. But here's the part history often whispers instead of shouting. Mansa Musa's true power was not just his gold or his numbers. It was how he used wealth to shape belief, knowledge, and global influence. And that secret would echo long after the gold was gone. What kind of ruler changes history without drawing a sword? How rich must a man be to rewrite the value of gold itself? As we move deeper into this story, the truth becomes even more unbelievable. To understand Mansa Musa, we must first understand his world. In the early 1300s, Africa was not a mystery to itself, only to outsiders. Powerful kingdoms rose and fell with trade routes, not castles. Gold, salt, and knowledge were the true currencies of power. At the heart of this world stood the Mali Empire. It stretched across vast lands of West Africa, from dense forests to open savannas. Rivers like the Niger acted as living highways, carrying goods, people, and ideas. Control of these routes meant control of wealth itself. Mali did not grow rich by chance. Beneath its soil lay some of the largest gold deposits on Earth. Mines in Bambouk and Bure fed a global hunger for gold. Nearly half of the old world's gold passed through Mali's hands, but wealth alone does not create an empire. Mali was organized, disciplined, and deeply connected to trade networks reaching North Africa and the Middle East. Caravans crossed the Sahara in long, dangerous journeys. Each step through the sand carried the risk of death or fortune. Islam also shaped this rising power. By the time Mansa Musa came to the throne, Islam had already spread through trade and scholarship. Mosques stood beside markets, and scholars debated law and faith. Mali was becoming more than rich. It was becoming respected. Mansa Musa inherited this empire in 1312, but not through peace. His predecessor vanished during a mysterious expedition into the Atlantic Ocean. Suddenly, Musa stood at the center of unimaginable power. The weight of an empire now rested on his decisions. Unlike many rulers, Musa did not rule only with fear. He believed power had to be seen to be believed. Reputation mattered as much as armies, and soon he would make sure the entire world knew his name. Beyond Africa, the wider world was unprepared for what was coming. Europe struggled under feudal systems and constant warfare. The Middle East held great cities, but even they had never seen wealth displayed like this. A collision between worlds was approaching, and it would begin with a journey meant to show faith. Instead, it would reveal power on a scale no one had ever witnessed. In 1324, Mansa Musa began a journey that would shake the world. He announced his pilgrimage to Mecca, a sacred duty for Muslim rulers. But this was not a quiet act of devotion. It was a moving display of power unlike anything seen before. His caravan stretched beyond the horizon. Tens of thousands marched together, including soldiers, servants, officials, and enslaved people. Hundreds of camels carried gold, each loaded with heavy bars that gleamed under the sun. Every step through the desert turned heads and raised questions. The journey across the Sahara was brutal and unforgiving. Days burned under scorching heat, while nights froze without warning. Bandits watched from afar, but none dared to attack. The wealth alone was terrifying, and the protection was absolute. When the caravan reached Cairo, the world stopped. Egypt was a center of trade, learning, and political power. Its markets were wealthy by any standard of the time. Yet even Cairo was unprepared for what arrived at its gates. Mansa Musa entered the city with calm authority. He dressed in fine silks, moving slowly, deliberately, and without arrogance. Everywhere he went, gold followed. He gave it to the poor, the scholars, and the merchants without hesitation. At first, Cairo celebrated him. Gold flooded the markets, and people felt rich overnight. Merchants smiled as coins exchanged hands freely. But beneath the celebration, something dangerous was beginning to form. Too much gold entered the economy too quickly. Prices began to rise, then spiral out of control. The value of gold itself started to fall. What once brought wealth now brought confusion and fear. The damage was not temporary. Cairo's economy suffered for years after Musa left. Historians later calculated that his generosity caused long-lasting inflation. One man had reshaped a global market simply by passing through. Yet Musa seemed untouched by the chaos behind him. He continued his journey east, crossing lands where his name now traveled ahead of him. Rulers prepared gifts, scholars prepared questions, and common people gathered in awe. But not everyone admired him. Some feared what this display truly meant. If one man could destabilize economies without violence, what else was he capable of doing? And that question followed him all the way to Mecca. By the time he reached the holy city, Mansa Musa was no longer just a king. He had become a legend in motion. And legends, once unleashed, are impossible to control. By the time Mansa Musa reached Mecca, his reputation had outgrown the journey itself. Scholars, rulers, and traders had already heard the stories. Some spoke of his generosity with awe, while others spoke in quiet fear. Everyone wondered the same thing: what was his true intention? In Mecca, Musa did something unexpected. He did not try to dominate through wealth or force. Instead, he listened, learned, and observed. He spent long hours with scholars, judges, and architects, absorbing ideas that would later reshape his empire. But there was a problem few people noticed at first. Mansa Musa was running out of gold. His generosity had been so extreme that even his endless supply had limits. The richest man in history suddenly found himself borrowing gold at high interest to continue his journey. This moment revealed something critical about his character. Pride could have ended the journey in shame. Instead, Musa accepted the loans openly and promised repayment. Power for him was not about appearing invincible. On his return through Cairo, the consequences became clear. The economy was still broken from his earlier visit. Prices remained unstable, and resentment had grown. Musa realized that his generosity had caused real harm. What he did next surprised everyone. He began buying back gold at high prices to restore its value. In doing so, he personally absorbed the financial damage. No ruler had ever tried to fix an economy he had accidentally shattered. This act transformed the story. Mansa Musa was no longer just a symbol of excess. He became a ruler capable of reflection and responsibility. His wealth was not reckless. It was deliberate, even when it failed. Yet mystery still surrounded him. Was this journey truly about faith alone? Or was it a calculated message to the world? By the time Musa returned to Mali, one truth was undeniable. The world now knew Africa differently, and that knowledge would never fade. When Mansa Musa finally returned to Mali, he did not come back empty-handed. He brought scholars, architects, and books from across the Islamic world. Knowledge now traveled the same routes as gold. The empire was about to transform in ways few had imagined. Cities like Timbuktu and Gao began to change rapidly. Grand mosques rose from the earth, built with new techniques and bold designs. Schools and libraries expanded, drawing students from distant lands. Mali was becoming a center of learning, not just wealth. Mansa Musa invested his fortune with intention. Gold funded education, law, and religious institutions. Literacy spread, and scholarship became a pillar of the empire. Power was no longer measured only by armies, but by ideas. The famous Sankar University became a symbol of this vision. Thousands of manuscripts filled its libraries, covering science, astronomy, law, and history. Scholars debated freely, protected by royal support. In a world still dominated by ignorance, Mali stood apart. Outside Africa, the impact was equally profound. European mapmakers began to redraw the world. On famous maps, Mansa Musa appeared seated on a throne, holding a gold coin. For the first time, Africa was shown as a land of power, not emptiness. But wealth always brings danger. Musa's empire depended heavily on strong leadership and careful balance. After his death, successors struggled to maintain the same control. The systems he built endured, but the unity slowly weakened. Still, his legacy could not be erased. Mansa Musa proved that influence could travel farther than conquest. He showed that wealth, when paired with vision, could shape history itself. And that lesson still echoes today. Mansa Musa vanished from history without dramatic collapse or public downfall. No great battle marked his end, and no empire fell overnight. Yet the shadow he cast stretched across centuries. Few individuals have ever reshaped global perception with such quiet force. His story forces us to rethink power itself. He did not conquer distant lands with armies. He conquered imagination, markets, and minds with belief, generosity, and vision. Even today, economists, historians, and storytellers still struggle to measure his true wealth. But perhaps his greatest secret was never the gold. It was the understanding that wealth gains meaning only when it changes lives. In a world obsessed with accumulation, Mansa Musa invested in knowledge, faith, and legacy. And those returns never stopped growing. So ask yourself this question. If one man could alter the course of history without violence, what kind of power truly shapes our world? And how many stories like this remain hidden, waiting to be told? If you enjoyed this journey through history, don't forget to subscribe to History Hub for more cinematic stories. Because the past is never silent. It's waiting for us to listen.